Order. I'm calling Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On budget morning, an opinion poll in one of the daily newspapers said that 76% of New Zealanders wanted to see the budget prioritise tackling the housing crisis and doing something for first home buyers. Oh, how New Zealanders have been let down and disappointed by this budget. How badly the National Government have got it wrong after talking up the housing crisis for months and leaking suggestions that they were going to do something about the supply of housing in Auckland. Well, they have left New Zealanders feeling badly let down, Mr Speaker. How bad is this housing crisis? Well, bear this in mind. House prices, the median house price in Auckland has now gone over $700,000. We've seen a 40% increase in house prices in Auckland since National took office in 2008. Foreign speculators are driving up the price of houses in Auckland, outbidding Kiwi first home buyers on the end of a telephone. We've got people living in garages and sleep-outs around the country, and the LVRs that the Reserve Bank have imposed, 20% minimum deposits, because this government has utterly failed to get a grip on the housing crisis. Those lending restrictions have shut first home buyers and low-income Kiwi families out of the housing market, handing the advantage to speculators, both foreign and domestic, sir. The best that this government could do was to announce the temporary suspension of anti-dumping duties and tariffs on some building materials, sir. That's the best they could do. And that is a very inadequate response to the housing crisis. There is nothing in the budget, sir, nothing for first home buyers. There is nothing to put a stop to foreign speculators bidding up the price of houses in Auckland. There is nothing to guarantee that children, 285,000 children growing up in this country below the poverty line, will have and who live in rental properties, will have a warm, dry home. Sir, this is the best that National is willing to offer the country. To lift the anti-dumping duties and tariffs on some building materials, sir. They've estimated on the back of a cigarette packet that this might save $3,500 off the cost of a new home, but we've heard nothing from the ministers or from members in the House today about why they think that saving would be passed on to first home buyers. What's to say in an overheated housing market that the builders and the developers will just pocket that $3,500? That's even if we give any credibility to the estimate that it would save $3,500, sir. What else alongside this measure did they announce in the budget? $30 million for social housing organisations. That's $30 million over 3 years. $10 million a year for social housing organisations. This has been supposedly the centrepiece of Nick Smith's housing policy, is to resource the community housing sector, sir, to provide more affordable housing. Alongside lifting of the anti-dumping duties and the tariffs on varnish and nails and wallboard, they've put $10 million a year to social housing organisations. And I calculate, sir, that on the basis of a house costing $350,000, it will take Nick Smith 455 years to meet his target of transferring 13,000 houses to the community housing sector. 455 years. So the NGOs, having heard with great fanfare in last year's budget, when Nick Smith announced the expansion of the community housing sector, has his great announcement, just like this year's one is lifting the anti-dumping duties on Jibboard. The NGOs have been left waiting for the last 12 months to hear what kind of resource the government would put into this initiative, and all they got was a measly $10 million a year. Utterly pathetic. So the other initiative alongside the lifting of tariffs and anti-dumping duties was $80 million to the Ministry of Social Development for the purposes of implementing the eligibility assessment for people to get into state housing. So the government's single biggest announcement right, alongside the lifting of anti-dumping duties and tariffs, was $80 million to pay the bureaucrats in MSD to do the job that Housing New Zealand has been doing within its baseline. This is unbelievable stuff. But look, there's more. There is more. $7 million in the budget to pay MSD to kick pensioners and disabled people out of state housing. And sir, alongside the lifting of dumping duties and tariffs, sir, which has been talked up as this government's huge contribution to solving the crisis of affordable housing. This is all they've got after Nick Smith being the Minister of Housing for a year and a half. This is all they've got to pay Housing New Zealand, to pay MSD $7 million to kick people out. And Paula Bennett announced it in a press release entitled Helping Families into Rental Housing. And actually, it's $7 million to kick people out of their state houses.
Order.
Unbelievable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to say, sir, that the public have been left open-mouthed, astonished that the government would talk up the housing crisis for the last few months, dropping generous hints that they were going to do something for first-home buyers. And this temporary suspension of tariffs and anti-dumping duties, estimated by someone in Treasury to save $3,500 off the cost of a new house, even if that's true, it's still a tiny, pathetic amount. It's less than 1% of the cost of a median house. Less than 1%. Get this, it's 2 to 3 weeks of house price inflation in Auckland. 2 to 3 weeks of house price inflation. That's all it's going to save, sir. And the Productivity Commission that Nick Smith loves to quote in this House as his Bible, it's the font of all wisdom. Well, the Productivity Commission, sir, they heard a lot of submissions on the question of building costs. And their report indicated that building supply costs in Australia are 76% of those for a standard home in New Zealand. So New Zealand is paying a lot more. In fact, based on that data, New Zealand is paying more than $20,000 adjusted for inflation and for the exchange rate. $20,000 more for building materials for a standard home than consumers in Australia are paying. And the best this government can do, after an extensive working group exercise to look at the building, MB officials did a market study on residential construction. We had extensive public consultation. A whole range of options were foreshadowed, sir, and the best they can do is come up with the temporary suspension of anti-dumping duties and tariffs on varnish, nails and jibboards, sir. It's unbelievable. I just want to say, sir, that in the context of this being the government's showpiece announcement on affordable housing, that it's worth noting that the budget's own figures tell us that under the current policy settings of this national government, the housing crisis is going to get much, much worse. The budget figures themselves, the interest rate track and the projections on wage growth tell us that in 5 years' time, by 2018-19, it will take 63% of the average full-time wage to service a mortgage, an 80% mortgage on a standard home. 63% of an average full-time wage, sir. It's currently bad enough. It's currently 49%. And everybody but the National Caucus and Nick Smith would agree that that constitutes a housing crisis. Well, in 5 years under this government's policies, it's going to go from 49% to 63%. And if you live in Auckland, that figure is 86%. So people paying off, hard-working Kiwi families, paying off a mortgage in Auckland in 2018-19, under this government's policies, will have to spend 86% of the average full-time wage just to service a mortgage. That's if they can afford to get into their own home. What's the upshot of this? The government, with this budget, has basically run up the white flag, sir. They've admitted defeat. They are telling New Zealanders that the dream of Kiwi home ownership is over. It's finished. They've given up and they've surrendered.
The Honourable Kate Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it's a privilege and a pleasure to speak at the first reading of the budget measures miscellaneous.